Hello, NextGen Nation. I want to welcome you to our first breakout session today. My name is Megan Pleasant, and I am the Marketing Content Specialist at GovLoop. I hope you enjoyed our opening keynotes with Kieran and Steven. I loved them, and I thought it was a great way to kick off the day. So I'm also excited to kick this off, our next session, How to Speak Your Mind Despite Bureaucracy. So let's get to it. I've got an idea is one of the hardest phrases to say when you're working in an environment that pushes this is how we've always done it. How can you break free of that red tape and truly speak your mind with conviction? Today, our speaker will share how they broke through the proverbial glass ceiling and learn how you can too. But before we get into that awesome content, we have a few reminders to go over. So let's get into our housekeeping. Please get on our Twitter. We want to know what you have learned today. So use the hashtag NextGenGov to share your takeaways. We also have some great additional resources that are available for you to download on the right-hand side of your console. That includes this slide deck that you're about to see. So don't forget about that because you're going to get some great info. Check those out. If you want to access the closed captioning feature, just look for the icon on the bottom right-hand side of the media player. And we hope you don't have any technical difficulties, but if you do, send us a message to that helpful Q&A tab, and my colleague Jacqueline will get your questions answered for you. So also in that same Q&A portal, you can ask our expert questions. Please do that. Drop them in whenever, and we'll get to them in the second half of our time together. And we also have an open chat available for you today, so don't be shy. We want to hear from you. To access the open chat, click on the blue group chat button in the middle panel of your screen, and you can interact with other attendees in there as well. If you miss a few tidbits, not a big deal. We are going to email you a link of this entire event tomorrow, which will be sent directly to your inbox. And finally, we are giving out 1 CPE credit for your participation in today's session. So be sure to take all the polls that are going to be in the presentation. The polling questions will show in the slides window. So click submit to send in your answer, participate in the entire session, and fill out the post-event CPE evaluation to obtain that awesome CPE credit. The CPE evaluation can be found in the resource module on the console or at the resource center in the main environment. All the CPEs will be emailed directly to you once we confirm you have met all of the requirements. So let's get to our speaker now that all that housekeeping is out of the way. Joining us today is Patrick Malone. Patrick is the Director of Key Executive Leadership Programs in the Department of Administration and Public Policy at American University. He is a frequent guest lecturer on kindness, gratitude, emotional intelligence, compassion, ethics, mindfulness, and leadership at various organizations, professional associations, and universities, including the Fulbright Scholars Program and the Work Human Conference. His research and teaching interests include human motivation, kindness, leadership, ethics, and organizational behavior. So without further ado, Patrick, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Megan, and hello to NextGen Nation. I hope you all had a great morning with your keynote, and it is a delight to be here. I'll be completely honest with you. When Megan reached out to me and Maddie and said, hey, Patrick, would you be willing to come talk about this topic? I said, no way. Are you kidding me? This is impossible. I don't even know what to say about this. Actually, that's not completely true. It is a challenge, though. I mean, one of the things that we see in our program at American University is we do see a lot of folks ask questions like this. Is how do you get your ideas out there? How do you speak your mind? How do you open up and be honest and say things when you work in a bureaucracy? A disclaimer from the very beginning, one of the things I'll say right off the bat is this will not be a talk about how to deal with a toxic boss. We're going to assume for the purposes of this presentation, we're just dealing with bosses that are too busy, colleagues that are too busy, bureaucracy that's kind of messy, If you're interested in learning more about dealing with a narcissist, I'm happy to send you an article or two, one that I wrote called Selfies in the Workplace. Great title, Selfies in the Workplace, about how difficult it is to work for people that are self-centered. Sometimes, sadly enough, if you work for a miserable enough, nasty person, you just got to find somewhere else to go. That's unfortunately some of the advice that we typically give. But this is not going to be about that group. We're just going to assume that we're working in a bureaucracy, got a lot of busy people, and kind of see where this goes. So I hope you enjoy it. I'm looking forward to this. I've been very excited about this presentation now for quite a while, and really, really happy to be here. So thank you for the invitation. Let's get going. Let's go on. I actually have a poll question from the very beginning here, right off the bat, and Megan's going to help us with the polls. And by the way, thank you to Jacqueline, who's sitting behind all the magical boxes as well. So what is the biggest barrier to new ideas in your organization? Just curious to see what you all think about that. I'm going to give you about a minute to go ahead and answer this particular poll. And while you do, I would just ask you to think about, what is it that's out there? What is it that in your experience has become a problem to getting new ideas out there, getting people to listen to you in the organization? Is it process? Is it just that there are too many processes in place and things get lost? Is it the bureaucracy? Is it just everything that entails bureaucracy? By the way, the father of the modern bureaucracy is Max Weber, who was a Renaissance scientist and philosopher who really was a fascinating writer. And I think Max Weber got kind of a bad rap because people say, I hate bureaucracy, but he actually makes some good points about how it is predictable and there's continuity and good things, but it causes problems. That's why we're here. Is it people or is it the attitude? Kind of been there, done that. What are the barriers to the new ideas in an organization? Can't wait to see what you all are thinking.
We're
this
almost
is great.
there.
They're still coming in. Wonderful.
Yeah.
Thank you all. 85 folks have responded so far. It's going to be great to see. I do love polls. I love polls. It's going to keep everybody engaged. And by the way, please do feel free to toss things into the Q&A in the chat. We've got a lot of us watching that, and I'll try to chime into that as much as I can. And certainly if I miss something, Megan will definitely let me know.
Absolutely. We are wrapping up that poll, so give it just one more second. Okay. Wow, you guys are fast here.
Oh, this is terrific. Hey, thank you all for the participation. This is great. 105 out of 131 so far. This is wonderful. Process, bureaucracy, people, been there, done that. I can't wait to see what you all say about this.
All right.
Here we go. Oh my gosh, wonderful. Okay, so 41.5% said bureaucracy and 35.8% said people. Wonderful. Okay, that's great. Thank you all for doing that. Let's talk about those two. Those came in first and second, so let's talk about those for a second. For example, this looks like a bureaucracy, right? It looks like an organization. Am I right? This is what when we think of organizations, we usually think of these lines. And when you look at federal agencies as well, it can be very, very complicated. Some organizations are very matrixed and there's lots of levels, and some are very horizontal and some are very vertical. But typically we end up with something that kind of looks like this. I actually put this slide up last night for my graduate students, and I said, what do you think about this organization? And they said, well, it's a bureaucracy. And I said, yeah, it is. And there's like 4 people below the top 2. Okay, that's good. Yeah, I got that. That's cool. And I said, so this is an organization? And they said, yes. And I said, no, it's not an organization. This is an organizational chart. This is just a depiction of various functions in an organization. One of the most common fallacies, I think, and I think one of the biggest, most common problems that we have, that our leadership has, mistakes that leaders make, is they come in and they think by rearranging these boxes, they've made a change in the organization. And in reality, all they've done is disrupt the relationships that exist among the people that populate these boxes. Organizations are nothing more than groups of human beings. And that's what bureaucracies are as well, just groups of human beings working together for a common mission, presumably, trying to get some work done, right? This is an organizational chart. What's most important about this is not the boxes, it's not the functions, it's the people that reside within. And that's the answer to that first question. The biggest barrier to ideas in an organization are the people. They're the people, and this is what we're going to talk about today, because it's not the bureaucracy itself. Yes, certainly there can be processes that are tedious, There can be things that you have to go through and places you have to go to get things done and paperwork to process and emails to send and formats to follow. And those can be annoying, right? But you don't get turned down for new ideas because of a bureaucracy. A bureaucracy is nothing more than an organizational construct. We get turned down for ideas, or people don't listen to our ideas because of people. And there's no such thing as a rational organization. And the reason is because organizations are staffed and made up by people, and people are by nature irrational. It doesn't make sense to me that I go and eat a 2,300 calorie burrito at Chipotle every Tuesday before class. I shouldn't do that. It's not good for me, but I'm not rational. I do it because I want it. It's my pregame meal, right? So we make irrational decisions all the time. And so the main reason why we don't see ideas floating around freely in organizations are people. And there's really two reasons for this. And this is where we're going to go with the presentation. The first reason is that people won't listen to me. They won't listen to you. Well, why won't they listen to you? Let's talk about that. The second thing is that we're going to talk about is how are we going to make them listen? So I'm going to convince you they're not listening, because they're probably not, right? And then I'm going to ask you, and then we're going to talk about what we can do to make them listen. So this is really not so much about bureaucracy, but about the people that populate the bureaucracy. And those are the ones that we're going to tackle. And by the end of the session, I think you'll have some really good ideas of things you can do, and we can go from there. So please, by all means, jump in and ask questions as we get going. So here is our next poll question. Why do people not listen to my ideas? Why do not people not listen to my ideas? Is it because I'm not listening to them? Is it because they fear change? Is it because I don't know my audience? Or is it because they're listening through their own filter? I'll give you a minute to take a look at that one. And while I'm looking at that, I see Andrea chimed in with a question or a comment about historical practice. Yeah, Andrea, we're going to get into this been there, done that, always been there. But I'm going to get into that from the brain perspective as to why people feel that way and why they say those things. There's very good neurological reason that that occurs. So thank you for that question, for that comment. That's wonderful. And Mary Michelle, I noticed change fatigue. Absolutely. By the way, about 70% of change efforts fail. I'm going to show you a slide on that in a minute. Yeah, change is a big issue, definitely within organizations. Okay, Megan, how are we looking on the poll?
All right, we got 108 of 137. Ooh, there we go.
Oh, look at these meditative, mindful people we have in the NextGen conference today, listening through their own filter. Great answer. So that is a correct answer. That's a wonderful answer. The I don't know my audience, I got about 5% there. Fear of change, 21%. I'm not listening to them. So honestly, everyone, by the way, this was a trick question. I'm so sorry to say this was a trick question. The answer is all of the above. They're all true. And we're going to talk about each one of these. Yes, people don't listen. But one thing that is interesting here when I look at these results, no one said, because I'm not listening to them. Interesting, isn't it? Why do people not listen to me? Well, sometimes it's because we're not listening to them, which means we haven't built the relationships with them in order to foster an environment where they care to listen to us at all. So I am a little surprised that we have 0 on that, but that is actually a legitimate answer to why people don't listen to ideas. If they don't think I'm listening to them, if they don't feel like I'm connected with them in any way, why should they? Why should they? There really isn't any reason. So yes, so all of these are correct. Let's go on to one of the first ones here, and this is fear of change. Now, I have a joke here, and my dear friend Jennifer Tether, our assistant director of the Key program, visit the booth, please visit the booth, told me this joke a long time ago, and I'm going to tell you this joke. So Buddha opens a hot dog stand. Okay, if you didn't catch that, let me just do that animation again, because this is pretty funny. Buddha opens a hot dog stand in New York, right? And this dude goes up to the hot dog stand and says, I'll have a hot dog. And Buddha says, that'll be $2. So the guy hands Buddha a 5. Buddha hands the guy the hot dog and says, have a nice day. And the guy goes, hey, wait a minute, what about my change? And Buddha says, hey, buddy, change comes from within. That's a good joke. That's a really great joke. So I hope you take that one with you. As I mentioned, I want to give credit to Jennifer, a shout out to Jennifer on that. I did mention before that we do have a challenge with change, and we do. 70% of change efforts fail in organizations. This is a number, I had to go back and double check this. This is a number that has been consistent for probably 20 years. I mean, this is a number that has changed very, very little over time. Many times change efforts fail. And many times it's because of the reasons in the last poll, because people don't listen to you, people, ideas don't get floated, they don't get, there's a lot of reasons. We're not going to go into organizational change, but change efforts are very, very difficult. So people do fear change. Why are they not listening to your ideas? Because they're afraid of change. They're afraid of doing something different. They're afraid of straying. If we've always done it before, what does that mean? It means we're comfortable. It means we're happy where we are. It means we're doing cool. We got our jams going. We got everything happening. We don't need to change. Everything's fine. No, actually we do. In fact, organizations that don't change are left behind quite quickly in terms of their ability to meet their mission effectively and efficiently. So we do have to change. We do need organizational change, and we need to constantly be striving for the right kind of change. But it is hard to do because people are afraid to do it. And this is why. We see change, the way that our brain sees change, for example. For me to overcome a fear of change is the same thing as me trying to overcome failure. So think for a moment about how you feel if you fail at something, especially if it's something important. Something at work, maybe a relationship issue where you failed someone that you love, someone that you care about, you expose something you shouldn't have said or whatever, you showed your ugly self in front of the person you love the most, right? We've all done it, right? And you feel terrible about it. You failed. And think about the way we feel when we have that failure and trying to overcome it, trying to forgive ourselves in addition to having our loved one or our friend forgive us as well. It's hard to do. This is the same way the brain sees change. The fear of change is very, very, very powerful in the brain, and it's just like overcoming failure. We also view uncertainty, and I'm going to get into this a little bit later with a really cool model called the SCARF model. But the way we see uncertainty is the same way we see error in the brain. So in the brain, we interpret uncertainty as bad, as a mistake, because the brain doesn't want uncertainty. Our brain isn't wired to do that. Our brain is wired for certainty, for continuity, for predictability, for survivability. That's what the brain's wired for. So when you introduce some idea to me, and you probably, maybe you're just thinking about it, you're kind of tossing things out in the wind to just kind of throw out ideas, and I'm afraid because I'm like, well, whoa, what would happen if that, my mind, what would happen if that didn't work? What would happen if this happened? What would happen if, and what if we expend all these resources? I'll tell you, one of the biggest mistakes that I've ever made, and I've made a lot of them, which is why I think Maddie and Megan asked me to do this presentation. But the biggest mistake was in our program. I had this brilliant idea one time, and I said, we're going to do a golf tournament. We've got 7,000 alums running around the federal government out of the KEY program. We're going to do a golf tournament. And we went to a really expensive golf course in Northern Virginia. And we said, we can guarantee you 148 golfers. And we put a deposit down of $3,000. And we started reaching out to our alums and saying, and all the team that I work with, they were very uncertain about this. And they're like, Patrick, are you sure this is a good idea? I'm like, it's a great idea. So we ended up with 7 people for this golf tournament, and I had to go to my dean and say I just wasted $3,000 of the university's money because it's not a refundable deposit. So it was bad, but it felt like an error, and it's uncertainty, and this is something people are uncomfortable with. The other way that the brain sees change is the brain sees it as a loss because it's not consistent with the way the brain operates. So these are very important, and this idea of fear is crucial. In fact, by the way, there's a word for this, metathesiophobia. Metathesiophobia. This is a great word for Scrabble, and it's a great word to throw out at parties. So just try to pronounce it, metathesiophobia, and then try to commit that to memory. That'll be a really good one to use around friends and family. But the fear is real, everyone. I mean, we can joke about it, but the fear that we have of change is so real that we can have physical reactions, certainly physical, illness, for example, heart palpitations, blood pressure issues, we have a strong emotional reaction to fear of change and fear of new ideas. And that emotional reaction comes from a place of not wanting to exist outside of our sphere of safety. We want to stay in a safe place. We want to have some predictability, and we want to have some continuity, and we can become very emotional about the possibility of fear. Think about when organizational change comes around, or a new idea that changes processes. And I'm thinking, well, wait a minute, hold on. That may cost me my job. I might have to move to another part of the organization. They may not need me anymore. What's going to happen to my job? I mean, those are things we naturally jump to. And it doesn't make us selfish. It simply makes us human. So what do? We avoid. So why are people not listening to your ideas? They're afraid, and they're avoiding you. And that's why, because it's challenging. It's hard. Now, I didn't even add the fact that our colleagues are busy, our bosses are busy, the people we love, they're all busy. They all got their thing going on. So we have to figure out a way to tap into an interest or tap into something that tells them, hey, there's something good in this that really fascinates me too. I'll get to that later. But this fear is hard to overcome. So that's one reason why these ideas don't get out. And we do. Hey, listen, thank you, brain. We appreciate you so much for what you do. Here's who we get to blame for this. We get to blame the brain. So here's a little bit about this amazing organ that we call human brain. About 3 pounds. Actually, the brain uses about 20% of the oxygen and blood in our system at any given time. So 1/5 of the oxygen in the blood cells that we have in our bodies are centered in the brain at any given time. So it's worse than charging your phone. It really takes a lot of energy. 60% fat, 23 watts. It generates 23 watts of electricity when we are awake. So we could charge our phones with our brain if we could figure out a way to hook that up. 100,000 miles of vessels. When I put this slide together, I thought, that is so trite. 100,000 miles, you just throw that out there. People go, oh my gosh, 100,000 miles. Let me tell you what this means. 100,000 miles of vessels. So within any human brain, there's 100,000 miles of vessels. In case you don't know how far 100,000 miles is, you can go around the world almost 5 times before you reach 100,000 miles. The Earth is only 24,000 miles in circumference. So this is in one brain, we have enough vessels to circle the Earth almost 5 times. Now, there's one exception to this, and that's my cousin, who doesn't have nearly 100,000 miles of vessels in his brain. I'm not going to tell you why. So, and we all have those in-laws, right? 100 billion neurons. I'm not even going to get into what that number means. I don't know that I could even put that in a way that would make any sense out of it. But this is what the brain is. So let me take us to our next poll question, and that is this one. How many bits of data does the human brain actively perceive at any given time? How many bits of data does the human brain actively perceive at any given time?
I feel like
30?
I'm going to be surprised by this one.
Yeah, 33,000, 300,000, 3 million. 33,000, 300,000, 3 million. So this is the amount of data that we actually take into the brain and use to make decisions. This is the data that we take into the brain and use to assess whether I want to listen to your idea or not, or whether I want to talk with you at all. I mean, this is what we actually bring into the brain. 33,000, 300,000, 3 million. And yeah, I see another question. Andrea asked a great question about how to talk to people who are the ones, that's the always done it this way. Yeah, we're going to get to that question. I'm sorry, I'm thumbing through these as we're seeing if, and Deanna, you said the background music is too loud. I don't hear music, so I don't know where that's coming from. I'm going to leave that to Jacqueline and to Megan.
I think that was for our intro there. So
the intro.
We'll pass that message along. Yeah,
very good.
We're almost there.
I requested Beatles music, by the way.
Yeah, we'll see if we can work on that.
Sounds good. Sounds good. So this amazing brain, how many bits of data does it actually perceive at any given time? Let's see. Hey, very nice. Good answers. So we've got 300,000. Terrific. 3 million comes in second. 3,030. So 8.5% said 30. Let's talk about that. So at any given moment, we are exposed to about 11 million bits of data per second. By the way, this is research from a woman named Cheryl Statz. Cheryl is at Ohio State University. Go Buckeyes! And and she's done a lot of research in this area. 11 million bits per second. So what this means is what I am seeing right now. So I've got a round light right there. I've got lights in that room. I can smell something coming out of the kitchen. I've got I hear people down the hallway. All these things are happening. This is everything that's around me right now. That's 11 million bits of data that just surround me. It can be any number of things. Even the feel of the counter when my hands are on the counter, the smoothness of the counter, any of the data that's out there. But of that 11 million bits of data that is bombarding us, we only actively perceive 30. 16 to 40. So about 5% of you got this one right. We only perceive 30 bits of data per second on average. And what that means, and this is something that I really want you to take away from this, everyone, what that means is that most of what we do, think, and see is unconscious. Most of what we do, think, and see is unconscious. Most of our interactions with people are unconscious. Most of the concepts that we have, the things that we look at, the things that we see, most of it is simply unconscious. And that's pretty amazing when you think about it, right? In fact, there was some research that was done, just came out. I don't know if any of you link to this particular feed, but there's a feed called The Conversation. And I really recommend The Conversation. If you've not put that into your feed coming into your inbox, it's really powerful. So The Conversation is a group of top scientists, and they write articles every week, and they're very digestible, very understandable, and they're on fascinating topics. It could be anything from the Incas to engineering to the brain to the oceans to politics to whatever. It's fantastic. And I saw an article last week that said that scientists now think that what we are seeing right now, at this very moment, what you're seeing in front of you, which most of you are probably seeing a screen of some sort, a computer of some sort, what you're seeing is not what's really there. In fact, what you're seeing is actually what was there about 15 seconds ago. We're seeing something that was 15 seconds old. And the reason is scientists have long known that our brain interprets information and interprets that 30 bits of data, that very small percentage of data. We interpret that using schemas and models, and the brain tries to make sense of it based on things it's seen before. This is why we carry bias with us. This is why we get locked into old ideas, going back to Andrea's question about old ideas and old ways that we've done it. We get locked into things we've seen before because the brain is comfortable with it. The brain likes it that way. And what scientists are suggesting now is that what we are currently seeing is the average of what we saw in the last 15 seconds. It still blows my mind. And this is just a fascinating study that just came out. And this is how this works, everyone. So the way this works is whenever you have a thought, for example, neurons fire and then they wire together. And they wire together to form what's called a neuronet. And this neuronet is the thought that you have. And if you have that thought once and it goes away, it just goes away. But if you have that thought multiple times, it becomes a neural pathway. We've always done it this way. This is the way this organization works. You young'uns better just stop fiddling around and just do your job. Go back and do your job, right? I mean, you hear this, especially from the older generations, but you hear this a lot. And this is why, because this is the way the brain sees the world. So this is why people don't listen to me or to you, because they've got these prefabbed ideas that are already there. Can we break through them? Absolutely, we can definitely break through them. We can break through this horizontal path. We can break through this horizontal thinking. But before we do, I think we have to think a little bit about what we are bringing to the table. So for example, if we're not sure, I'm sorry, one more slide. I forgot I added this one. When we're in this horizontal mindset, this leads to an overly technical perspective, which is not good, because an overly technical perspective leaves the emotional side out of the workplace. It leaves the human side. This horizontal thinking also leads to metric worship. I preach about this all the time. Metric worship, we got to stop. Data matters, metrics matter. But when we worship at that altar and we forget that the human beings are the ones that are implementing our programs, that are listening to our ideas, then we end up losing out because we don't rule by metrics. Subject object, this is simply a way, if you look at this diagram, look where the word subject is. It's behind the eye. If something is subject to me, it's back here. I can't see it. I don't think about it. It is my operating system. The goal is to take things that are subject to us and bring them forward to make them object so I can see them. Now that I can see them, I can make a decision. I can say, oh, I had no idea. And our goal when we're pitching ideas is to get these subject things out of people's brains and move them forward so they can see them. And look, we can be frustrated. I get it. I mean, we can be frustrated. I've had this issue in my career as well, where I have an idea, trying to sell it to my boss, and my boss literally cannot see or understand what I'm saying. They just don't have the knowledge to do that. And there's a lot of barriers and biases and things that are tied into that. And I got to figure out a way to navigate through that so that I can get them to understand what I'm saying and why I think it's important. And it's very hard to do, everyone. This subject object thing is tough. This is some work that's being done out of Harvard, and it's really a fascinating topic. It is possible to do it, but we have to do it for ourselves. So we have to be able, you know, one of the things I mentioned in one of those early polls was, am I listening to them? Yeah, they're not listening to me, but am I listening to them? I mean, have I created the environment that causes my folks not to listen or my bosses not to listen to me? Have I been the one doing that? Because maybe I have. And I think we have to ask ourselves those questions. Maybe the answer is no, but maybe the answer is yes. And if we can get beyond this horizontal thinking, you know, we can think about, well, why would they be not listening to my ideas? Well, maybe I mentioned we're not listening to them. That's a possibility, right? They're not listening to my ideas because I don't believe I deserve to be heard. Think about that for just a minute. Do I believe that I deserve to be heard? Am I confident enough, not arrogant? Am I confident enough in my presentation skills? Am I confident enough in my idea? Have I researched my idea comfortably enough to where I can present it in a way where it can be heard? Do I feel like I deserve it? It's a great question. I mentioned ignoring audience. Maybe they're not listening because I'm ignoring their needs. It's so easy for us to get caught up in the pointing to our boss and they're not listening, they're not this, they're not that. But in reality, you know, what we have to pay attention to their needs too. And sometimes it's nice to say to your boss, hey, I appreciate what you do. I can't imagine your job. I just can't imagine it. And if your boss is doing their job well, then you probably don't know that much about what they do. And that's okay, because they're probably protecting you from external forces and budget cuts and resource issues. So know your audience, and that will help people listen to you. If you speak only for yourself, that's going to be a problem. So one of our daughters, when she got her first job out of college, within a few years got promoted. And of course, I called her and gave her free, unexpected dad advice. And I said, okay, here's the thing. You got promoted. You know why? Because you're really good at your job. You're good at your technical skills. You did a great job. I said, but Caitlin, the next promotion is going to come when your bosses see you bringing up those around you. You've already proven yourself technically. We already know you're better than most. We already know you're smart. We get all that. That's why you got promoted. But now what I'm watching for, if I'm your boss, I'm now watching to see if you're speaking only for yourself. Or are you bringing people with you? Are people following you? Have you inspired others? Another thing to think about whenever we wonder why we may not be being listened to. Maybe our body language doesn't match our words. You know, so much, as you all know, 60 to 70% of what we say, or the message that we send, comes from body language. Are we consistent with that? Are we a good presenter? Are we concise in our presentations? One of the things I see with our executives in our program, when they present, they want to have really busy slides with lots of words. They want to talk forever. The people that need to listen to your ideas don't have that amount of time. So we've got to figure out a way to present in a way, either in person or whether it be virtual or PowerPoint, that matches our message for sure. Maybe we ramble. That's another presentation issue that we have to deal with. And the filtering was on our initial survey. And yeah, they're filtering. You know what? We're all filtering. That's what we do. We're all filtering. So a lot of ideas about why that message may not be getting through, why people may not be listening to you. So how do we make them listen? What are we going to do to make these folks listen? Well, first of all, authenticity matters. And I know this is one of those words I think that we're seeing so much. We see it used so often now. I think people rightly roll their eyes. One of the things that we do in the Key program, when we talk about authenticity, we say, yeah, authenticity, but authenticity to which self? Because we have multiple selves. So what self am I being authentic to? Hermione Ibarra is a wonderful, Herminia Ibarra. She is a wonderful author who's written a lot on the topic of authenticity. I recommend anything that she has written, Ibarra, Herminia Ibarra. And she writes an article that says, hey, listen, we've got multiple selves. Here's what we need to know about authenticity. And it goes back to the slide before when it said, are you speaking only for yourself? You can't fake it till you make it. It doesn't work. Neuroscience has discovered that there is a connection that happens between human beings. And if I get a gut feel that you're not legit, I'm probably right. You are the same way. I use this all the time with our kids. When I got a gut feel that what's going on isn't really what's going on, you just start asking a few questions. You may be wrong, but you may not. So people know fake when they see it. They sense fake when they see it. And fake will work for a little while, but ultimately it's going to be uncovered. So new ideas can't be just about you, and they've got to be about the organization. And in a lot of ways, they've got to be about our bosses. They got to be, when I take my dean a new idea, or the president of our university a new idea, I'm pitching it from the standpoint of how it's going to make our university better, how it's going to draw more students to us. This is, now the golf tournament, I probably never should have told you that story. That was a bad idea. That was just about Patrick wanting to go out and play golf and have fun with people. That was nothing to do with, the business. But we know if we present matters, if we present our ideas from an authentic standpoint, and you know what? It's okay to be passionate about it. In fact, it's great to be confident. I think it's wonderful. I joined the Navy many, many, many years ago. And when I did, I remember this old crusty lieutenant looking at me and saying, you know what, Patrick? He said, you're going to have a great career as long as you have a PMA. I was like, excuse me? What's a PMA? Positive mental attitude. And I thought, that is the corniest thing I have ever heard in my life. But I was new to the Navy, so I just said, yes, sir. I had no idea. Positive mental attitude. How silly is that? You know what? It wasn't silly. It's absolutely wonderful. And positivity, confidence, energy, and passion fuel great change in our organizations. And they fuel great ideas, and they fuel excitement about ideas. If you want your ideas to be listened to, be confident about them, be passionate about them, make it come from within, that true authentic self, that soul. Make it about the passion of the organization and involve people, how you're going to involve people around you. This is contagious. People want positivity. We like this, and it makes people happy, and they feel good, and they live longer, and they have less turnover, and they're more productive. All these things happen in the workplace. So please use that when you're presenting ideas, because if we can do that, if we're confident and positive, it can be a very, very good thing. Here's another, I think probably one of the biggest mistakes that I see in selling ideas to our chain of command, to senior leaders, or even to others, is challenging tradition, not people. So when we have a new idea of how to fix a process that's broken in our organization, I think one of the first things we have to ask ourselves is, well, who owns that process? Who owns that tradition? Who owns that approach? Because everybody, please, there are people behind everything. There are human beings, souls, hearts, people that have been affected by COVID, people with loved ones, people that are lonely, people that are ill, people that are concerned about other people, people that are hungry, people that are sad. There are human beings behind everything in our organization. So yeah, you know what? Sure. We have a clunky admissions process, and I have a great idea for it, but I can't get my bosses to listen to me. Well, have I thought about who that impacts? And I'm not saying that we shouldn't change for that reason. What I'm saying is that we must be sensitive. We must be sensitive to what happens whenever those new ideas are implemented. So it's always got to be about the tradition or the process. I could have put the word process in there. But I thought tradition was good because that kind of speaks to the ensconced way of thinking, that we've done it before attitude that we see in organizations. So challenge that, but be mindful and do the homework first about who that's going to impact, and think in advance about the options for them. Because if we're going to automate an admissions process, for example, or going to automate a program evaluations process, does that mean that I'm going to lose 2 analysts? What's going to happen to those analysts? Where are they going to go? What, are they going to be part of our organization anymore? What's going to So these are things we have to consider whenever we're creating new ideas and we're trying to look for positive change, trying to get people to listen to us as well. This is another very important one. Everyone be curious. You know, there's a lot of literature out there on humble inquiry. Edgar Schein, S-C-H-E-I-N, Edgar Schein has written a lot on this topic. And there's a lot of other authors, including yours truly, that have written on this topic of humble inquiry. There is so much positive to be gained from curiosity. So when we are talking about our ideas to other people, to our bosses, we should be asking questions too. Not just pitching the idea, but asking questions. What do they think? How would they see this work? What if this? And if things start to get emotional or a little heated or antagonistic, the power of the question is so important, because the question gives us space. So let's say, for example, I'm pitching an idea to Megan, and Megan, responds, and we're going back and forth on this. And I'm starting to get frustrated because, doggone it, Megan's locked in her horizontal thinking, and she's not listening to me, and she's got her filters going on and all that. Instead of reacting in a way where maybe not the most emotionally intelligent reaction, perhaps my best move is to take a step back, take a deep breath, and start asking a couple of questions to Megan. Here's the message that sends to Megan. One, it says, I care about what you think. Now, if I want somebody to support my ideas, I doggone want them to think that I care, and I should care about what they think, right? That was one of our early poll questions, and we didn't get that one, right? We should always think about, do we know our audience? Do we know what they want? Have we listened to them? So the first thing is it tells Megan, I care about what you think about this. I really do. But the second thing it does is it buys me a little time to calm down, because if I'm getting spun up a little bit and I start asking very nice positive questions or curious questions of Megan, it gives me some time, and time is my ally here. It gives me a chance to relax, let the amygdala calm down a little bit in the brain so that we don't get hijacked and say something we shouldn't say, right? So curiosity is an amazing, amazing talent. Patience and silence, everyone. I am not good at this, and my team can tell you I'm not good at it. If I get an email that spins me up, I want to respond right away, and I'll get an email from our associate director, Sophie, or our assistant director, Jennifer, and they'll say, Patrick, don't, before I've even finished reading, Patrick, don't reply. Patrick, don't reply. They don't want me to reply. Wait until tomorrow. I'm like, I can't wait until tomorrow, but I've got to wait until tomorrow, right? But I understand. So the curiosity, the patience, a little bit of silence, it really works in our favor when we're trying to get other people to listen to our ideas. Here's another one, and that is flip the perception. I don't know how many of you remember the advertising campaign that was out a number of years ago that was called Got Milk with a question mark. And we saw that all over the country. Well, here's why that happened, because the dairy industry at the time was under a lot of pressure from vegetarians, from nutritionists, from other scientists that were saying milk is unhealthy, all these dairy products are unhealthy, but especially milk was really getting a bad rap. In fact, many of you probably don't know this because you're not old enough, but I'm old enough to remember when milk was delivered by a milkman. They were called a milkman. They literally dressed in white. They literally drove white trucks, and they literally left bottles of, I can't even say it, not even non-fat. We're talking about a gazillion fat percentage of a ton of fat, full whole milk on your porch in the sun. They just left it there. That's what they did. And when you got home, you took it in and you put it in your refrigerator. So that was back in the day. Well, everyone got wise to the fact that there's a lot of health issues with that, and milk started getting to be not very popular. So instead of attacking it from the standpoint of, no, milk should be popular and nostalgia and all that, advertisers and marketers flipped the perception, and they started making it cool to have milk. So they came up with the Got Milk logo with a little question mark. And if you all remember, that ended up being Got Anything. I mean, you could do, Got Key for our Key program, Got Key, question mark, Got Romo for when Romo was the Cowboys quarterback. It was Got Romo. I saw a thing for that. Anything cool that everybody liked, then it was got that question mark, how cool, right? So flipping the perception of your idea is really good and making it cool. Here's another thing about the idea. Sometimes when we are trying to figure out how to reframe our ideas, we fall into the trap of asking why. Why won't they listen to me? Why doesn't anyone think this is a good idea? Why are they so stuck in their old ways? I mean, we get the why, the why, the why, the why. In this case, why tends to be a negative. It tends to look for explanations that are probably too complex to really uncover, or explanations that even if we did uncover them aren't going to make us feel any better. But it gives us a sense of, if we can find an answer, if we can create an answer, even if it's an artificial answer, to the question why, it gives us a sense of, okay, well, I knew it. So that way we can say, well, I knew that's why. And then I can be at least content with the fact that my idea wasn't accepted. And it's because of that. That's why. That's the easy out. Okay, that's the easy out. That's not where we want to go. Flipping the perception of a new idea is better addressed with what, the question beginning with what, W-H-A-T, what. And the reason is that what leads us to the future. What is not looking for why can't this happen, why didn't this happen, why won't they listen. What is focused on what can I do to make this idea more palatable? What can I do to create an environment where that group is going to catch on with this? What can I do to maybe find some of the other shortcomings that I didn't see in my idea? What can I do to prep this better? So it requires more work of us. It's a lot easier to just say why, that's why, I'm done, and then be grumpy, and then on the FPPS score, write terrible things about your organization. If you ask what, it makes you do the hard work of trying to figure out where to go next. So that's another trick to flipping the perception. A really, really good one. I really recommend that one. I can't advise this strongly enough. You know, there was a book a number of years ago written by a guy named Jim Collins called Good to Great. And in this book, he looked at 600 and some odd organizations that went from good to great. And he measured that by mission accomplishment, they were private sector organizations as well. So there was some fiscal improvement and market share, things like that. And what Jim said, when he looked at it, he said, I wonder what it is about the chief executive officers, about the leaders in the organizations that went to great. What do they have in common versus the ones that stayed that were just good? What did this top tier have in common? By the way, he wrote a book later on, one I really recommend, Jim Collins. He wrote Good to Great for the Social Sectors. I actually recommend that one over his original book because it's written for the public service. But what Jim found was that great leaders, which means people that were able to get their ideas out there and get people to listen despite bureaucracy, despite other human souls, that great leaders had two things in common. One, they had fierce resolve. They didn't give up. They asked what, not why. They didn't give up. They did not give up. Persevere. Number two, they had a strong dose of humility. They were very, very, very humble. And we wrote a book last year, Leading with Love and Laughter. And in this book, we talked about humility and the need to be humble in the workplace. And to be humble, I mean, in life, just simply in life. Everything that we do, we transcend to life as well. And I think that part of the way that we sell our ideas, and I've kind of been focusing on selling them up the chain, but really it's not so much just that. It's selling them to those around us, the colleagues around us, you know, our other project managers, our other division directors, our other analysts, whatever it is that we happen to do. It's really not just a matter of reaching up. It's a matter of surrounding ourselves with people. Give the credit. I mean, bring focus groups together and ask them to talk with them about your idea and what you want to do. Have them poke holes in it and then create something new. And then when you bring it forward, tell your boss, this came as a result of a conversation that I had with these parts of our agency and a couple of external agencies. We also brought in a few experts outside to hear the idea. That gives you a lot of credibility. And in reality, almost every great idea, if not all of them, are all co-owned in some way. There's always something that somebody said or did that sparked a neuron in your brain to think about a new idea. And if we do that kind of work prior to presenting these ideas, and we give the credit and we share and we co-own and we make this about everyone, not just us, then we have a lot greater likelihood of people listening to what we want them to hear. And then the other thing I would say is envision the retort. Envision the retort. So for many years, and I was telling, I didn't realize this was going to work our way into our conversation today until I was talking to Megan before, and we were talking about football. And I, for many, many years, was a football official. And one of the things that I do for anyone who follows that particular sport is I was what they call a back judge. So I was in the very back of the defense, and my job was to watch wide receivers, to run backwards really fast, and then watch them and see if there was pass interference. So what I would do prior to every game that I had is I would go to a local restaurant near the stadium and somewhere that had really good unsweetened iced tea, because that's my drink. So I was sitting there, I would drink iced tea, and I would read my playbook and I would read my rule book. And the playbook had a play. It would say, so-and-so happens, this happens, this happens, this happens, what's the call? And I would read that, and then I would literally close my eyes, and I would sit there and I would envision the snap. I would hear the players running toward me. I'd hear the crowd. I would see the ball in the air, even though you're not supposed to really watch the ball in that position, but I know the ball's in the air. I'm looking at the bigger body of work here, so I can take as much into my brain as I can see. Whatever happens, happens, and then I know whether to blow a whistle or throw a flag or whatever. The play is over, I open my eyes. That's envisioning. That is an extraordinarily powerful, powerful process, because if I have an idea that I want to share, and I envision the conversation I'm going to have with my boss, and I envision a negative reaction, I think, okay, well, what might they say that would be a negative? Here's something they may say: Patrick, we don't have the resources. This is something we've tried before, blah, blah, blah. Okay. Now I'm thinking through that. I can literally see myself sitting there hearing this from my boss. I can see my boss in my brain. I'm listening to the words, even though they're not being spoken. I'm living those words. And now I'm going to respond, and here's what I'm going to do. Now, here's why that is so powerful. When we do that, we have already lived the experience neurologically, which means that when it happens to us in person, we've already done it. And we're a lot more likely to respond better because we've already done it. The only difference is that we didn't physically do it. We didn't say the words, even though we could. We could use our hand gestures. We could just act it out. We could do that as well prior to the meeting. But if we envision the retort, if we envision the response, and then think about what we're going to say and then rehearse that in our brain over and over again, we have literally lived through that situation already. Isn't that great when you go in to sell an idea, to convince someone to do something? Because now you're comfortable with what you don't have to worry about being prepared at that point. You're already there. You've already had the conversation. They just don't know it. This, from a neurological standpoint, everyone, this is a very, very good practice, and it's one that I really hope that you'll consider using. I've only got one more, and that is this one. There is a cognitive neuroscience guy named David Rock, and I always like to say, if my name was David Rock, we would have 1 million people in this session. And you know why? Because David Rock is a much cooler name than Patrick Malone. Patrick Malone doesn't flow. It's 2 syllables and 2 syllables. You throw the Sean in the middle, but that sounds kind of presumptuous. And then people ask me, are you related to Post Malone? I'm like, yes, I am related to Post Malone, but I don't typically share that. And so I go on and on. Patrick Malone, I'm not related to Post. I always say that, though, because I want people to think I'm related to Post. And one of these days I'm going to get a letter from Post telling me to cease and desist. But David Rock is a great name. He created this idea based on the following. Being that the human brain has evolved over years and years and years by either running away from threats or running toward good things. Threats, sticks, big rocks and fire and things like that back in the cave person days, and then running toward food and warmth and clothing and whatever made us comfortable. This has not changed, everyone. We're still this way. We are completely this way. In a meeting, if I am in a meeting and someone says something to me that's disrespectful or mean or they're cruel in some way, I go into what we call neurological shutdown. So I'm running away. I'm just running away neurologically. I may be sitting there, and I might expose it by with a hand gesture or something like this, or lean back and cross my arms. It might, but if I don't do that, my brain's done gone. I've already shut down, and I'm not going to contribute. We all know what that feels like because it happens to all of us. So how do we use this concept of the brain to be able to sell ideas to people? It's very, very simple. The idea is called SCARF. And what it says is that we want, all of us have a neurological desire for status. We all want to know that we matter. We all want to know that there's something about us that's special and that, that we mean something. I mean, it doesn't mean we're egotistical. We all have this. We all want to know we have some sense of status. We all want to have some idea of certainty. So when you're pitching an idea to someone, remember, you're putting them into the uncertainty part of their brain. We talked about how hard that is. So the idea of certainty, when we're pitching a new idea, we've got to make sure that people know, I may not have all the answers, but here's where I'm pretty sure this is going to go. Just give them a roadmap, right? That satisfies the brain's need, our human need for certainty. Autonomy, we want to have a say. I want to have a say. I want to know that that maybe I'm getting to contribute in some way. And so autonomy becomes important. Relatedness, I want to feel like I belong. So I want to know that when you're talking to me, that you consider me to be one of you. I'm kind of in the in group. I want to be accepted, and I want to be part of a diverse team, and I want to be valued for what I bring. And what I bring is going to be a lot different than what somebody else brings. But I want to feel like I have that kind of human connection. And then fairness, this one not as directly applicable to pitching ideas, but sort of is. We all have a sense of equity, a sense of justice. And we all see that violated in the workplace every single day. We see it all the time, violated all the time. Probably of all these, that one's probably violated more often than any other. The idea of fairness and equity among all of us. But if we can keep these things in mind, if we can remember that human beings want those things, if we can give people a sense of status, a sense of certainty, autonomy, relatedness, fairness, when we're talking with them, when we're interacting with them, they have a reward response to us. They move toward us. They're more engaged with us. And that's the secret, everybody, of selling those ideas, of having people move toward us. So going back to what I said initially, we gave that very first survey, what is it? And probably wasn't fair that I tossed bureaucracy in the title. My bad. Sorry about that. That was probably, I kind of led everybody down that path. But my message is, it's easy to blame an inanimate object, which is a bureaucracy. It's easy to blame an organizational chart. But in reality, the challenges that we have about the ideas are tied to our relationships with others. What can we do to help them listen to us? And as a consequence, remember, all this is reciprocal. And what can I do to create an environment of status and certainty and all the SCARF stuff so that people want to move toward me, so they want to follow me? The greatest leaders are not the ones who are directive. The greatest leaders are not the ones who run the biggest organizations. In fact, there's a lot of horrible leaders out there running big organizations. The greatest leaders are those that we follow, And if we can convince people to follow us, our ideas will sell themselves. They will sell themselves. So with that, I only have one more slide at your last poll. On a scale of 1 to 10, how cool is Patrick and his presentation? You have 4 options here. 10, 10, 10, and 10. And I just want to say thank you to Megan for letting me put this poll in. I thought she might make me take it out. That is actually not a real poll, of course. Okay, thank you so much for you all for saying that. And once again, greatly appreciate everyone's time. I kind of lost track of the chat. Got a couple minutes. I'm happy to answer any questions.
I believe we have a question from Katie. If you want to grab that one in our Q&A.
Thank you, Katie. Let's see. I'll just read this. I think some of the fear and change is rooted in the fact that government programs are often responsible for millions of dollars. I'm leaning forward, and millions of people. So errors will have a huge negative impact. How we reconcile this with well-founded fear with the need to make improvement? I think what you've touched on there is, Katie, is that the stakes are high. That's what I read into your question, that the stakes are high. Here's one thing, but that's why you self-selected to public service. It just is. It's why you're there. It's why all of you are in the public service, because you realize the stakes are high and what you do is important. You all are part of the most noble and important type of work I think anyone can do, and that is serving our citizens, delivering our democracy. So yeah, any errors you make are probably going to have a big impact. But there's one lesson that came out of the book I mentioned by Jim Collins, and that was don't let caution become your inertia. Do not let caution become your inertia. It is much better to fail and continue to learn than it is to do nothing at all. Because if we do nothing at all out of paralyzed fear, because we're afraid we're going to make the mistakes, because look, it's going to have an impact. You know what? The likelihood is if we don't make change, it's probably already having a pretty negative impact. That's why we're even talking about the change. So don't let caution become your inertia. Take a chance. Make sure, though, before you do, that you socialize this with the right people, that you build the coalitions, you build the support, because sadly, too many leaders in our world think that failure is a bad thing. Only in very rare circumstances is failure catastrophic. Very rare circumstances. Of course, there are some, admittedly, and we all know, we could talk about those. But in most cases, in most agencies, failure of a new initiative, of a new program, not the end of the world. Not the end of the world. And if we're not doing hypothesis testing, if we're not being creative, if we're not asking those questions, we are going to fail anyway. So why not give it a try? I hope that answers your question. I know that's hard. I've been there. I get it. I understand what that's like. I completely understand. So I hope that answers the question. Anything else we got out there, Megan?
Unfortunately, that's all the time we have for today, but I think that is an excellent way to end our session. So thank you so much for sharing those wonderful insights with us. I have been taking notes this whole time. I know I have things that I can apply to my future, and I know everyone attending does as well. So thank you to our 2022 NextGen Partner Alliance for helping to put on today's NextGen Summit. I do have a couple of quick reminders before we log off this section. Do not forget to fill out your CPE evaluation in order to get your credit. Download all the additional resources from the console, including these super helpful slides. If you had any issues with the polls or the CPE evaluation, make sure to check out the Resource Center or head on over to the help desk, and anyone from our GovLoop team can help you. Up next, our lunch keynotes will begin at 12:30 p.m. Eastern. That's going to be really exciting. You can access that session through our conference hall in the main environment. We're going to be talking about how to root out what annoys your team, tips to fix those issues, and how to create a psychologically safe team. We will also honor our 2022 Public Service Award winners. So thank you very much to everyone who came. Thank you to Patrick, and we will see you in the next session. Bye for now.